Hello, Baha'i greeting, Aloha to all the people of the earth. Today is 29th of the October, time is 12:13. This video and the few of these previous ones are an insert in the regular project because of the question that they were asking me. I decided to take care of it. Last time I talked to you about the covenant breakers, those who break the covenant based on their desire, carnal desires, selfish greeds. Tonight I'm going to be talking about the other type of covenant breakers, that they have confused philosophy. They're confusing themselves. In order to understand this, because there are a lot of different confusions, we have to get first a picture, the perfect picture of what the Baha'i Covenant is. Based on that, everyone can easily see how people go wrong and where they went wrong. A study of this is very simple. My God, it's the simplest things in the earth to understand the faith of God, but because we're not getting paid to do this, and it's not something that there's a gun behind our head to do it, we just procrastinate and, put it always on the back burner and don't do anything about it. You want to understand it? You have to read the Will and Testament of Abdul-Baha, which is that few pages, and the World Order of Baha'u'llah, the Dispensation of Baha'u'llah, that part it says Baha'i Administration, which, my God, is another 20 pages. So it's not a big, area to cover, but you have to read it and then consult it with other Baha'is. Get together, trying to understand it, then you get the pictures. But I'll tell you anyways, these elements that constitute the Will and Testament of Abdul-Baha, Baha'u'llah of Shoghi, and then essentially the covenant of Baha'i Faith. In my study, I have found there are 5 elements in the covenant of the Baha'i Faith. The very first one is the will of God and His testament towards the Baha'is. It seems the Baha'i individuals who apparently have no authority, they're simple Baha'is, are the most important elements of the will and testament. Without them listening and accepting and doing their responsibility, the entire machinery of faith, whether universal laws of justice, assemblies, and nothing can work. Shoghi Effendi says, myself and all the committees, whatever we are, we can't urge you and push you to go and teach. It's your own individual decision to do it. And that is the most important thing, the individual effort. So that's the first element that I found is towards us. I'm going to discuss that. A lot of us think that the Baha'i is the person who just sign a card and then wholeheartedly understand that Baha'u'llah is the new manifestation of God, and now he's a Baha'i, shake hand, goodbye, I'm gone. That does not make a person Baha'i at all. The fact that you know where the university is or you took an admission to come into it, you're no graduate. You're not even studying it. The first verse of Kitab al-Aqdah says that. First you have to recognize me, then you have to follow what I say. Now, a lot of people think that, okay, we're not doing anything bad, that's what I hear. Well, that doesn't make you a Baha'i. A lot of people, they don't do bad things. There are still others that do a lot of good things. That doesn't make them a Baha'i. What we can do that the others can do, then what's the point of being a Baha'i here? If it was just goodness, giving, even prayer, even fasting. So every other religion, they do fasting and prayers. There are specific things that makes us a Baha'i. Okay? And the most important things that all the good people of the earth, all of them, they do not know what it is, and only a Baha'i can do that. What do you think that is? Teaching the Baha'i Faith. Good people of the earth, including Bill Gates, Nelson Mandela, they don't teach Baha'i Faith. When you start to teach, then you're a Baha'i. They don't go pioneering from one place to another place to propagate the faith of God. They don't. They don't read the Baha'i books So there are few elements. For all of them, there might be an excuse. I don't have enough time to read. I can't go pioneering because I have a job. But for teaching, there's no excuse. If you don't teach, my friend, I'm telling you that the best thing you have to do is to go and excuse yourself from the membership of the Baha'i community. That includes how many people? 99.99%? Yes. There's a huge problem. These type of Baha'is, they're Baha'is, they're very good people. Everyone says among the Persian community, oh, Baha'is are such a nice people. We heard that. That's not good enough. Because of that, nobody becomes Baha'i. These type of Baha'is, what do? They elect assemblies, reflecting themselves. They're not involved in teaching. National, reflecting themselves. They're not in teaching. So is the member of Universal House of Justice. They don't reflect, any teachings. I know one of them, that Don Barron was involved in teaching in Colombia and other places. But teaching, bringing people into the faith of God. This is what you're signing as a Baha'i to be. Don't do it, nothing is going to happen. There's a lot of difference between a good person. Shoaib Effendi says that, well, let the good people do the good things. Please, you Baha'is, just teach the Baha'i faith and be a Baha'i. Because that's what others, they don't know how to do it. You can do it. So, there was a bunch of writing. I'm not going to refer to all of it, but I'm just going to bring a couple of them from the Will and Testament of Baha'u'llah. At the Baha'i, we have to understand the unity in diversity. We're all united in the 5 elements, understanding Bab 1, Baha'u'llah 2, Abdul Baha 3, Shoaib Effendi 4, and Baha'i, the word order of Baha'u'llah. There are 5 elements. That makes sure we have to be united in that, but we can be diversified in how we understand this. But even that's not enough. Baha'is could believe all of these things completely, from A to Z, but they say we don't like each other. This part in the city and that part in the city, they don't want to talk to each other. They want to go and elect their own local, ultimately national, and ultimately 2 Universal Laws of Justice. Abdul Baha says both of them are out the door. No good. Why is that happening? It's because people have not studied well the faith. If they do study the faith, there's no room for disunity as such. But it can go to that point. Abdul Baha says clearly, if we do not understand this unity, this faith of God will disintegrate just like the religions of the past, will just remain a forsaken name, forgotten name, somewhere in the libraries of the world. He says that in the book called Amr wa Khalq. It's a Persian book, but all the Baha'is, they know. It's right on the website. So, and they ask Shoaib Effendi too, can this faith of God takes over the planet? Or is it going to be like another religion added? He says it's up to you. How far do you want to take it? So all of it is up to us. So without the element of teaching, we're not understanding the Baha'i faith. I don't know. I'm not Shoaib Effendi. I'm not a guardian of the faith of God. I'm not authority. But I would think that we have to excuse those who do not want to teach the faith of God from joining the Baha'i faith. Or we have to make 2 levels. Those who want to do the elections in the Baha'i faith have to be involved in teaching. Or at least those who can get elected, they have to be, must have involved in teaching the faith of God. That's an amazing issue. What it is, let's see what Abdul Baha says. He says a few things. First, we understand the faith of God. He says, O you beloved of the world, the greatest of all things is the protections of the true faith of God, the preservations of His laws, the safeguarding of His cause and service, and to His words. So, we have to study them. Second, he says, of all the gifts of God, the greatest is the gift of teaching. It draweth unto us the grace of God, and is our first obligations. Of such gift, how can we deprive ourselves? Okay? He has lots of things to say to us. All the friends and loved ones and all to bestir themselves and arise with the heart and soul and in one accord to diffuse the sweet savours of God, to teach his cause and to promote his faith. It behooveth them, and to not to rest for a moment, neither to seek repose. They must disperse themselves in every land, pass by every clime, and travel throughout all the regions. Be stirred without rest, and steadfast to the end. They must raise in every land the triumphal cry, Ya Baha'u'llah, although the glory of the glories. In these days, the most important of all things is the guidance of the nations and the peoples of the world. Teaching the cause is the utmost importance, for it is the head cornerstone of the foundation itself. So, see this? I'm not going to go further more, you know it. But without teaching, so it is very important. These are the most important elements of the faith of God. But everyone has a misunderstanding. They think the greatest, perhaps achievement is to be the member of the local or a national or universal laws of justice. Pardon my French and my Persian. Bullshit. That's nothing. There's no difference between a member and a non-member. That is not the goal. That is not the climax of spirituality. It means nothing. Those who are really into the teaching and take the pleasure of teaching the faith of God, they don't like to get there. I talked to one member of Universal Laws of Justice, Don Byrne. He says, I don't know, what have I done that I came here? He apparently, clearly, didn't like it to be the member of Universal Laws of Justice because he was enjoying teachings, you see. So, get out of this, high horses and the wrong things that you're thinking that, Baha'i Faith is not a bunch of information. Based on that, you want to rule over the others. Remember that, okay? Let's get to the second element. So, the second element in the covenant of the Baha'i Faith is essentially talks about the successorship. Baha'u'llah clearly says, Abdul Baha is my successor, and Shawi Effendi and Abdul Baha says the same thing about the guardian. It elaborates it more, and I've written about 10. Just I'm going to mention the titles. First of all, it says after me is the Shawi Effendi. Then it says Shawi Effendi is the guardian of the cause of God. He has to appoint the other guardian that has to come after him, otherwise there is differences in the Baha'i Faith. What we have to understand here about this one is that Shawi Effendi is the first and the last of the infallible guardians of the cause of God. Clearly in Kitab Aqdas, most holy book, it says that, Baha'u'llah, do you understand this? You understand the guardianship and successorship. He says, when I'm alive, presently, all the donations that come to me, when I'm gone, that means I'm dead, I'm not here. I have no physical being. Then it goes to Aqsan or successor, which is Abdul Baha or anybody comes after that. Then he says, if they are not here, it goes to Universal Laws of Justice. What is that telling you? It's telling you that just as he says, I am not going to be here, Abdul Baha will be here, he says at one point there won't be no Aqsan, no branches here. And then the Universal Laws of Justice will be in charge. You see? So, to have Universal Laws of Justice, apparently you can't have any Aqsan left. If they're around, so they're the boss, he says. Everything returns to them. If they're not, so they mustn't be there, in other words, in order for Universal Laws of Justice to come about. What is the point of making Universal Laws of Justice if it's ruled by some guardians? Might as well just that guardian do everything else, because these guys are nothing but elected to obey him, you see? That's why these two, they cannot be at the same time, in my opinion. However, It's not ruled out that they can't be. It says in that case, if it is, Shoghi Effendi has to do that. So Shoghi Effendi is a matter of the principles. Abdul Baha, as if knew that Shoghi Effendi is not going to say who is the successor. He purposely says that the successors has to be appointed by him. What does that tell you? That means that if Shoghi Effendi did not have any appointed guardian, that there can't be any guardian. Because Abdul Baha said so. He said guardian. Shoghi Effendi has to appoint a guardian after himself. If he doesn't, hello, there can't be one. We can't invent for him. Then we will become him. Can't do it. Universal said we can't do it also. We're not Shoghi Effendi. We're something else. So this is purposely said, in my opinion, so nobody can claim he is the guardian of the faith of God. Why? Because we Baha'is say, hey, hold on. Abdul Baha says Shoghi Effendi has to appoint. You're not appointed by Shoghi Effendi. This order of Abdul Baha, cleverly, masterfully done, it's given the scepter in the hand of the Baha'i to refuse the wrong ones. So it's very beautifully said by Abdul Baha. Then he says Shoghi Effendi is the irreplaceable chief of the universal laws of justice. Again, this is correct if there is a universal laws of justice and, guardian at the same time. But there is no guardian who is infallible, just like Shoghi Effendi. Therefore, universal laws of justice cannot have a boss, should not have the one. If you think it had to have one, then it would have. When it says it's a matter of the principles, you see what I'm saying? So then he says everyone has to obey him, including the member of the universal laws of justice. Sure, member of universal laws of justice will obey Shoghi Effendi and the guardian, whoever comes after him, if there is some. If there isn't. Number 4, it says the hands of the cause of God, which are 27, assistant of Shoghi Effendi, only he can appoint them. Nobody else. Guardian of the cause of God can appoint hands of the cause. All right? So, number 5, he says he is the infallible interpreter of the writing of God, just like Abdul Baha himself was it. When it comes to Shoghi Effendi, who does not have a child, this is very, peculiar. He talks about the future guardians. Oh, confusion, see? I'm going to fix it for you. But he himself didn't have a child. But he's talking yet about the guardians of the cause of God. What is that telling us? It's telling us that these kind of guardians, if they are around, since they're not his child, they're not from Afsan, they're not appointed by him, then they're not equal to him. The guardian is a general term, thousands of times used by Abdul Baha and by Baha'u'llah, many places. Baha'u'llah, for example, says, in a village in Iran called Seysan, he says, oh, my guardian in Seysan. Guardian here is used as a general term. As a specific term, which is the infallible, that's with a reference to Shoghi Effendi. Such child does not exist, it wasn't there. Then, he says another thing. He says, since there are future guardians, he says, what are they going to do? He says that they have to continue the interpretations. He said, I've given you only but the essential, the salient features. The future generations will have to come down to do it, which means future guardians, those who can interpret. This can't be universal laws of justice, this can't be ordinary Baha'is. Confusion against. We're going to fix it. The most important things he does about the guardianship, he takes it of a person and turns it into an institution. He actually talks about the institution of guardianship. He says the world order of Baha'u'llah has 2 pillars, the universal house of justice and the institution of guardianship. That's what his word is. He says these 2. But the institution of guardianship that he talks is absolutely the boss of universal laws of justice. Universal laws of justice has to obey such guardians, okay? And we know a person cannot be the institution. Shoghi Effendi cannot be the part of this institution because Abdul Baha says he's the chief the irreplaceable chief of universal laws of justice. Therefore, Sharia Effendi cannot be also having the membership in the institution of guardianship. You're a member in one place, okay? It can't be at the same time in two places. I mean physically, literally. Number 9, he says, guardian of the cause of God actually has the veto power over the decisions of universal laws of justice. Universal law says this, guardian says no. He vetoes it. And if it exists again, an infallible guardian with universal laws of justice, sure, such veto power exists, but there isn't one, so no one can veto the decision of universal laws of justice right now. And the most strangest of all thing, he says, he talks about the guardianship to be one of the principles of the Baha'i Faith, just like we have the progressive revelations that we know after Baha'u'llah another prophet comes. Sharia Effendi says after Abdul Baha and after himself there will be guardian coming till the end of the faith of God, and they're inspired by Baha'u'llah. See, that's another confusing matter, because universal laws of justice is inspired by Baha'u'llah, so is the guardian. What's going to happen if these two deny each other? That they're both wrong. Somebody's lying, because God is one. He can't say one thing to his guardian and another thing to his universal laws of justice. This tells me that just by being the member of universal laws of justice, you could be a butcher in the grocery stores. You may not have any studies. It's a matter of election. People elect you. That does not qualify you to be inspired by God. The person who's going to be inspired by God is a person who puts all his life in the faith, sacrifice his life. So those people like Martha Ruth, those kind of people probably, being fair, they would be inspired by Baha'u'llah to do. Therefore, they are the one, these guardians are the one that they inspire universal laws of justice by submitting their finding to them. This is how universal laws of justice gets inspired. Now, we're going to the third element. So Abdullah doesn't just talk about that there's another guardian after me. So Baha'u'llah doesn't talk just about Abdul Baha after me. They both talk about an institution called universal laws of justice. First of all, number 1, it says all of its members have to be men. They cannot be women, clearly. And they're all elected. Elections, brothers, sisters. Elected by the Baha'i communities. This universal laws of justice is infallible, it says. But there's two types of infallibility, Abdul Baha says in the some answered questions. One is essential, such as Baha'u'llah is born with it. The other one is, he says, conferred upon. In the case of universal laws of justice, is not essential, does not have infallibility. It's just Baha'u'llah's conferring upon them. So it's conferred upon. You understand this too. Then he says that they have to bring the new laws, the one that purposely Baha'u'llah did not bring because of the matter of time. This is the right of the universal laws of justice, nobody else. However, he puts 3 restrictions on them. Number 5 says they cannot interpret the writing. Universal laws of justice many times have said that so. Number 6, it says they cannot revoke and change the writing of Baha'u'llah. We all know that. They cannot do that. Number 7, it says they cannot interfere in the institution of guardianship. It says none of this institution can and should interfere in each other's affairs and business. Number 8 is very, very important. Universal laws of justice is not the world order of Baha'u'llah, does not end in universal laws of justice. He says universal laws of justice is a branch, very important, a branch of the world order of Baha'u'llah, not all of it. Okay? Now, when it comes to Sharia Effendi, he's setting a goal to practically achieve these universal laws of justice. Even at home Abdul Baha, there were assemblies at home Sharia Effendi. All the assemblies were around, national and local. And he Sharia Effendi appoints 8 people to be the member of the International Baha'i Council, of which Mason Remey, the confused covenant breaker, he was actually the chairman. There were 3-4 hands of the cause in it. And then he says, in due time, this international institution, International Baha'i Council, have to become from appointed, it have to become an elected, like a Baha'i court, he says. It has to be in elections. They cannot just be appointed. So whoever was appointed, it was a temporary, appointment by Shoghi Effendi that couldn't last. He says it shouldn't last. It will have to be changed. Then he says on the third phase, it would become the Universal House of Justice, again by elections. Somewhere here that I found. Can I read this without my glass? Appointed International Baha'i Council happened in 1961. Ruhia Khanum, the wife of Shoghi Effendi, the hands of the cause, was one of them. Is it liaison, he says. Charles Mason Remey was the president. Emilia Collins was the vice president. Leroy Iwas, who was also the hands of the cause, was the secretary general. And then Jesse Revel, Lutfullah Hakim, Athel Revel, Hugo Giogri also was hands of the cause. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hands of the causes of God were appointed. This is very important. I'll tell you where the confusion comes. I'm going to explain it later on. To have a job is different from to have a title. The title by the Shoghi Effendi was given was one, hands of the cause of God. But they had different responsibilities. As you can see, Mason Remey became the president of the Baha'i Council. Ruhia Khanum became the liaisons. They have a responsibility to protect the faith of God or propagate it. These are responsibilities. These are not titles. If you're called the president of the Baha'i International Council, that is not your title. It's your responsibility. Your title, you are known as hands of the cause of God. All right. So Shoghi Effendi, as I said, at his time, he made 3 stages in order to reach the Universal House of Justice. First was International Baha'i Council, appointed by him. Then it was an elected one. Came after, 1961. And then finally, 1963, the first Universal House of Justice was done. This is the third element in the covenant. We're going to get to it more. Number 4. There is, besides having a guardian, having successor as a person, divine in nature, and besides the Universal House of Justice as an institution elected by the Baha'is, also in the Will and Testament of Baha'u'llah, Abdul-Baha and Shoghi Effendi, there are other people called hands of the cause of God. In the Will and Testament of Abdul-Baha says only Shoghi Effendi can appoint them. And he could nominate them, nobody else can. Okay. Their responsibility is to protect and propagate the faith of God. He also says they have to elect within themselves, by election, within the hands of the cause of God, a 9-member, which with a central committee, they call it custodians. And you know what the hands of the cause can do? Huge power they have. It's given. They actually can reject. They can reject the one that Shoghi Effendi has appointed as the guardian of the cause of God after himself. Let's say, per se, Shoghi Effendi appointed somebody. It has to be approved by the hands of the cause of God. If they don't, he has to go and change it. This is huge, my friends. Hands of the cause of God and their institution were just right immediately next to Shoghi Effendi. They were authorities. This is given. And finally, he says that the hands of the cause of God, they have the power to cast off, to excommunicate, to send away anyone that they found out that this man, whether the hands of the cause or not, it says clearly, if they find that this man is injurious to the faith of God, they can expel him out. This is the power and authority of the hands of the cause of God. It's written. I'm going to go to the fifth element. Most of you don't know, but this after discuss it next topic, not right now, because there are confusions. Baha'u'llah clearly talks about 5 people, and it's a prayer. He says, God, I ask you and ask them and ask you, I entreat you to these 5.